Hi guys, Paleo here from Athletic IQ. Today I'm going to be interviewing someone who I've been wanting to interview for so long, and that's Aragon. He's one of the most respected nutritional leaders in the industry. Today he's here as part of his Australian tour. He's just done his Sydney leg and he's going to be doing it. He's going to be doing the Melbourne tour later on this week. By the time you get this video, some of you guys would have already seen that tour, and so today might be a bit of a recap, but it's going to be awesome. Firstly, let me introduce Aragon. Okay, welcome to Sydney, Alan. How are you enjoying your stay?
Oh, I've been really enjoying it quite a lot.
Yeah.
I did the bridge climb, which was quite an experience, and I also ate some kangaroo at the VIP dinner after the first seminar there. So
you've tried kangaroo?
Yes.
What did you think of it?
It was nice and lean and clean.
Clean? Was it paleo though?
It was paleo friendly. So that was the whole theme of my tour, is the paleo friendly tour of Australia.
Right. It was titled a little differently earlier on. It was the Aragon Australian tour.
Yes.
So you've just completed the Sydney seminar, which I've been to, and it was absolutely fantastic, and you're well on your way to do the Melbourne leg. So I'm sure a lot of people will enjoy that. Let me lead into some questions now and carry on with this interview. Something that I really picked up on during your talk was the mindset of a scientist. And can you talk to us about having a scientific mindset, and I guess the different types of scientific studies and research that's published, ranging from abstracts to meta-analysis, and help the layperson differentiates science from, as you put it, science from BS when they look at diets.
Yeah, this is a real minefield for the layperson, because they don't really have anywhere to go besides perceived authority in terms of what they want to believe or what they're, what they don't believe. So it's really difficult. One of the things that the layperson can just right off the bat understand is that most news stories, even in scientific news stories or studies that are pushed out into the lay press, they are almost always sensationalized in some way, shape, or form. They're almost always twisted into some sort of story that's designed to tug at people's emotions, rather than what's presented in the actual study, which is usually some modest kind of effect that's really kind of unspectacular. The study's got a bunch of flaws and limitations that the researchers themselves would acknowledge, and so everything gets kind of twisted into this major story. So one thing that the lay public needs to understand is that the type of research that usually makes headlines is observational research, and what I mean by that is research that is not a controlled experiment. It's typically just a look at some sort of phenomenon going on with a population, and they just the researchers attempt to draw correlations between some sort of thing, like like a given food, and they try and draw some association between that and some kind of disease state, like diabetes or cancer or heart disease, and that's that whole thing. So they have to understand, things that make headlines, it's observational data, it's not controlled, so there's really no cause and effect established there. And the lay public, I guess, without being trained formally in the sciences, what they can just kind of adopt is a skeptical mindset. In other words, they need to just not believe until the evidence is consistent and compelling. Right.
So not really give in to the fear-mongering, basically, isn't it?
Yes. There's a lot of that going on. Yes.
Yeah. That's widespread in the fitness industry. So. Look, while we're on the subject of diets and BS, I suppose the next thing I want to do is I want to crush some diet myths with you.
All right.
So I'm going to go through a few different topics that I'd like you to sort of, I guess, put your experience into.
Okay.
So there's a lot of alarmism that goes on in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that will be sugar, paleo, organic food,
Mm-hmm.
artificial sweeteners, and eating to boost hormones.
Mm.
So maybe we could go through that one by one, if that's okay with you. So the first thing we'd cover off is sugar.
Okay.
Why should people not be scared of sugar?
Well, in the beginning, anytime that you put an evil or avoid stamp on any type of food, then you automatically raise its mystique, and you actually make the food more attractive, sort of like some kind of forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden. And so when you give a single stupid food that kind of power, then you set people up for a neurotic relationship with food. You set people up for the potential to binge on a given food because they think, oh, this is a bad food, and they secretly drooling over it, when no one's looking. So the whole thing about sugar and I quit sugar and I whatever it is. Can I get dirty over here?
Absolutely. Go for it.
I quit masturbating to sugar.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It's like, come on, man, get a life already, and learn a bit about moderation. Learn a bit about the idea that you can pretty much have anything as long as you don't have it in excess all the time.
Yeah.
And so sugar falls into that category. A lot of people blame sugar for the downfall of humanity when the data really isn't there. Now, it's tough to actually track population-wide sugar intake for any length of time, let alone tracking it since the beginning of the obesity epidemic, which started in roughly the 70s and really kind of kicked up in the 80s, and people mistakenly just blame sugar for obesity and diabetes and heart disease when there's a lot of other factors that occurred across the 70s, 80s, and 90s and the 2000s, and a lot of variables go unaccounted for, and people just selectively choose sugar as the one thing that caused it, which is completely false. There are other factors, such as a big one being a sedentary shift, physical inactivity, just pervasive, the internet, labor-saving devices, and also the increase in other types of foods like added fats and oils, increase in grains, especially refined grains. And so, you can't selectively choose sugar as the bad guy, because then you're getting a whole false picture and you're giving sugar too much power.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think part of the problem is that people try to pigeonhole the problem into one aspect of society when really it's a holistic approach, right? So it's not just sugar. It's not just over availability of crappy products or whatever. It's actually everything all at once. People not moving enough and whatnot. So I absolutely get that. Now, something that we discussed at the workshop was a particular celebrity's take on paleo. So I wanted to talk to you about that. And I know that we asked for him to debate you, and without success, unfortunately. As I was expecting, I knew that was going to happen anyway.
Sure.
What's the story with paleo? What's going wrong with it?
Well, paleo, at the core, is this romantic idea that we can kind of get back to nature, get back to our roots, get back to our prehistoric habits. And the leap of faith and the leap of logic there is that things were great in the Paleolithic era. Things were, and our health was great, and we had strong bones and strong bodies, and lower incidence and lower prevalence of disease and all this stuff. And fact of the matter is, none of that is true necessarily, at least in the general sense. And secondly, the whole idea that there's a single Paleolithic diet that excludes grains, legumes, and dairy is really not true according to the data. You know, when you look at the different geographical locations, people just ate what was available.
Yeah.
And there was a wide variation in the types of foods that were available in various geographic locales. And so the idea that there's a single paleo diet is false from the start.
Right.
And secondly, there's archaeological data, quite a bit piling up now, showing that humans ate grains.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then they tend to shape paleo to their own personal bias too, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah. There's paleo is kind of evolving into this animal that, okay, well, it's paleo plus dairy, and we'll call it primal. And then some people are like, oh, I do paleo, but I eat non-gluten grains. Right. And so, yeah, paleo
so
is
paleo
definitely
all week, but I'm okay to have a beer on the weekend.
Bam, that's right. That's right. Alcohol, you know, somehow not paleo, or rather, alcohol is paleo when you want it to be paleo.
Right. Exactly.
So the whole thing is absolutely silly. And then paleo, it puts the avoid stamp on various foods, and even foods like legumes. You know, where's the data on the health dangers of legumes? Oh, wait a minute, it's not there. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. God, you know, Asians have been living off legumes for so long, and I know that you touched on blue zones.
Yeah.
Having one of those commonalities as well.
Yep.
You know, so it's definitely a healthy food if you want to put it that way.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. The whole restricting of foods because of somebody's romantic ideal, and there's so many fallacies with paleo that it would just take a whole day to really kind of go through them.
Absolutely.
And people have to realize that, well, a lot of times people need to be part of a community. Mm-hmm. And so if it means going on a silly ass diet like paleo, well, then they'll do it. So.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a big problem too.
Yeah.
So I'll move on, and I'll go through this a little bit quicker. But organic food versus GMOs.
Okay.
Let's get your take on that.
All right. The literature on organic food, by and large, shows that organic food is not necessarily safer, nor is it more nutritious than conventionally produced foods. And the evidence behind the GM crops, GM foods, etc., same story. You know, there is a very consistent safety record for GMOs, and of course, people will say, "Oh, Monsanto, this and that," and you know, I would just say to those folks, you know, just pull your thong out of your butt and just relax, man. You know, because the data isn't there to support the alarmism. And it's like a first world problems complaint.
And if someone were to look for a study, again, supporting these sort of things, you can always look for a bias, I understand that. But if you were to look for a fair study, I'm sure they could go to your site and find credible links to support what you're talking about as well. And we'll put Alan's links and site onto the notes. Okay, so from there, I guess let's cover off artificial sweeteners and the phobia to artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, artificial sweeteners is another target. People tend to be anti-technology, you know, whether it's pharmaceuticals or whether it's even supplements. And then artificial sweeteners is one of those things, just because it's something that hasn't been around since our Paleolithic ancestry. It's got to be bad. Well, you know, planes and the internet weren't around either, but we're doing okay. Artificial sweeteners have recently been blamed for things like diabetes and even things like obesity. But once again, there have been some recent systematic reviews and meta-analyses looking at the effect of artificial sweeteners on body weight regulation, and in fact, they do help with weight loss and weight maintenance, contrary to some people's beliefs. And the research linking artificial sweeteners with overweight or obesity are typically observational data where it's probably a case of reverse causality, where people get overweight or get obese, and then they seek out ways to mitigate the condition through artificial sweeteners. It's not the artificial sweeteners that caused the obesity.
Yeah. So it's a correlation, not causation.
Right.
I remember looking at the study that you're talking about, and I think the ratio, there was one particular incident where they did the study with rats, and it did cause in one circumstance, an issue with with the rats, right? But the ratio of aspartame to, to concentration was something like 16,000 to 1. So, by all means, if you want to drink a swimming pool of Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi or something like that, then maybe you might be in a bit of trouble. But
sure. Excess in anything, even artificial sweeteners, can be an issue. So
exactly, and the problem is excess. It's not actually that particular ingredient per se.
Right.
So just I guess finally from me today, what we'll talk about now is just eating specific foods to boost your hormones. I know that some people have seen coaches out there who encourage them to eat a specific food, and that particular thing must be in their diet, like a broccoli to boost testosterone, for example. What's your take on that?
I think that attempts to manipulate hormones in particular ways with diet is, I think it's pretty futile, for the most part.
Yep.
Of course, there are ways to mess up your hormones through diet. I mean, for example, you can chronically consume a diet that is just excessively low in total dietary fat, sub 20%, sub 10% all the time, and trying to avoid saturated fat, and then testosterone levels can drop. But as far as saying, okay, well, you got to eat these particular foods in order to get the testosterone up, and like the broccoli example, and it's like, the end to which people recommend that is to affect body composition somehow.
Yeah.
And so these fluctuations of testosterone within the physiological limits, there's really no reliable correlation with changes or enhancements in body composition when you're looking at those relatively small changes.
Right.
So I would say, instead of focusing on hormones, focus on things like what would increase muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah.
Focus on things that would affect body fat loss, and then marry those dietary protocols with the right training.
Right.
And because hormonal changes are going to happen whether you kind of like it or not, they happen in the background constantly all the time.
Yep.
And you can't control everything you think you can control, but there's a lot of gimmickry that can come out of attempting to do that. So I would take the focus off of that and put it on things that we can concretely manipulate. Yeah.
Absolutely. So never put the cart before the horse, as Eric Helms would say, right?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. So.
Good old Eric. Shout out Eric Helms.
He's a cool dude. So for today, for this section of the interview, that's me. On the next part, I'm going to introduce our sponsored athlete, Robbie Frame, which will come in part 2 of the series. He'll interview Alan with a topic that you might be interested in, which is nutrient timing, which Alan has extensive research on. So,
Robbie the Phenom.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you, Alan. Thanks for this interview, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you very much, Paulo.
Thanks.